Dear students, we now step ahead into lecture 4 of week 10 on registration and licensing, and the discussion for today will be on general provisions in India's EXIM policy. By now, you have a good understanding of what is export-import policy. Today in this lecture, we will be discussing some of the general and basic provisions provided by the export-import policy or trade policy of India. So this is how the lecture will proceed. It will first discuss the purpose and scope of the EXIM policy, the legal foundation and authorities concerned. It will then move on to key objectives of the policy, then discussing about who may engage in export and import, maintaining and getting an importer-exporter code, which is a general rule. We will then also discuss the classification of goods according to the policy and policy conditions, standards, quality of goods and conformity assessment, country of origin and preferential trade, documentation and electronic systems, practical takeaway for businesses. Let us start with the purpose and scope of the EXIM policy. Dear students, India's EXIM or foreign trade policy sets the broad rules for how goods and some services are exported and imported. The latest foreign trade policy 2023 has made some amendments. Its general provisions clarify who can trade, what documentation is needed, and which approvals or restrictions apply across sectors. So, following the EXIM policy, an exporter or importer can be aware of what are the products that are prohibited or restricted and what are the products that are allowed to be exported or imported under the export-import policy guidelines. What is the legal foundation of EXIM policy and what are the authorities involved according to the policy? The policy operates under the Foreign Trade Development and Regulation Act and its rules and orders. The authority concerned is the Directorate General of Foreign Trade, which serves as the nodal authority that issues notifications, handbooks, and public notices to implement the policy. So by going through the notifications on the DGFT website, the exporter or importer can get regular updates and information on the EXIM policy. Now let us look into the various objectives of the policy. The first objective of the EXIM policy of India is to facilitate trade, improve India's rank in the ease of doing business, and ensures compliance with national security, safety, and quality standards. Trade facilitation is an important stepping stone for the external sector of India. Countries over the world have made a lot of progress in liberalizing the trade policies. But what remains is, especially for developing countries, giving a push to the exporters and importers. They require at several times a gentle hand-holding by the government and the designated authorities. For that purpose, trade facilitation is really important, and this is how trade facilitation is being recognized as a major objective of the EXIM policy. Improvement of ease of doing business. Doing business is complex and certainly more complex when foreign countries are involved. A lot of uncertainty accompanies this problem. In order to reduce these uncertainties, the EXIM policy tries to improve on various parameters of ease of doing business. These may involve getting contracts made easy, getting electricity permits in a limited time, or a smooth process for getting electricity permit, and other ways also may be noted. Ensuring compliance with national security. At any time, the national interest must supersede while trading and engaging in international transactions with the foreign buyers and overseas destinations. Quality standards and safety must be adhered to. In this case, the EXIM policy gives importance to maintaining safety checks, particularly concerning agricultural products, food products, and even stretching to technical regulations and standards in manufactured and industrial goods. The second objective is linking trade facilitation with export promotion so that firms can scale reliably and access incentives in a rules-based way. Who is liable to engage or who is permitted to engage in export and import? Any legal entity within the borders of India providing a valid PAN number is allowed to engage in trade after obtaining an importer-exporter code from DGFT. The EXIM policy recognizes manufacturer exporters, merchant exporters, as well as service exporters, and it allows supporting manufacturers to be linked for certain schemes. But the crucial thing remains here is anyone who is interested in exporting and importing must be issued an importer-exporter code. What is importer-exporter code? We have already discussed it at great length, but let us get us a quick recollection of what IEC number was. IEC is a basic registration used by customs, banks, and DGFT systems to track trade transactions. The EXIM policy's general provisions require that the IEC profile remains updated by the exporter from time to time with consistent details, and any changes must be clearly and within time updated in the exporter's profile. How are the goods classified under the EXIM policy's general provisions? So the products are classified into free products, restricted products, prohibited products, or canalized products. The general provisions under the EXIM policy require the exporters to check the current status before contracting because restrictions may involve prior licenses, quotas, or technical regulations. So, in case you were about to import or export a restricted product and the guidelines state that before importing or exporting of such goods, you have to get a prior approval from a designated authority within a time frame of 30 days, and you don't have that information with you. In that case, you will face a lot of penalties and charges, and it will also amount to confiscation of goods and maybe cancel out your registration. So, in that case, it is really important to be aware of the product classification under the EXIM policy and what are the various approvals required before stepping into the export or import of such products. Standards, quality control, and conformity assessment. Where compulsory standards or quality control orders exist, the policy expects exporters and importers to comply with the notified Indian or international standards. These Indian standards could be FSSAI standards in agricultural products or BIS standards in the case of industrial products, and etc. Testing, inspection, and certification must be arranged in time so that customs clearance and buyer acceptance are not delayed. All the certifications, whether it be from third party or from export inspection agency, must be applied for and furnished within the time frame as needed by the shipment or needed by the customs. We now come to country of origin and preferential trade. The general guidelines of EXIM policy particularly states the country of origin's importance. In international trade, every exporter needs to specify what is the source of the particular good that they are exporting. It is not necessary that a product exported from India originates in India only. For example, if we take the case of an iPhone, it might be assembled in China, but it is designed in California. So while exporting it, it needs to be mentioned how much content is, what percentage of origin is from China, what is from the US. This is the importance of certificate of origin, specifying the country of origin. Why is it required? It is required for the exporter to claim the benefits in tariff liberalizations or under various trade agreements. So this is how we connect it with preferential trade. So traders must ensure that origin rules are met and that the certificate content matches invoices and shipping documents. There must not be any mismatch at this stage. The policy encourages electronic filing through DGFT and custom systems such as IceGate so that documentation is consistent and traceable. Banks issue electronic bank realization certificates after receipt of export proceeds, which are used for incentive claims and final closure or completion of the transaction. General provisions also allow common payment terms such as letters of credit, collections, and open account, subject to RBI rules on realization periods and documentation. The policy includes simple procedures for export of samples, low value gifts, and temporary export for repair or exhibition, subject to value limits and undertakings. So, a certain quantity of gifts and samples can be exported, but these must be subjected to the limits and undertakings as per the policy. The policy also provides for re-export or re-import of goods under specific conditions in the condition of original transaction that cannot be completed as planned. General provisions cover movement of foreign cargo through India and transshipment between ports or airports under bond and customs control. They also outline that coastal movements must follow separate coastal shipping regulations where applicable. So the coastal rules are different from the rules of normal goods. Deemed exports and domestic supplies against authorizations. In such cases, either the supplier or the recipient may claim the admissible benefits as laid down in the policy and handbook. We have already seen the provision for capital goods and inputs, where capital goods duty relief is provided. Imports of capital goods are given a duty relief, or at a concessional rate they can import it. Even when schemes are used, the overarching provisions on documentation, installation certificates, and timely reporting continue to apply. We have already studied what an RCMC is and what is the purpose of RCMC being connected to specific export promotion councils in order to receive specific guidelines and be a network of same product line exporters and engage in various opportunities and activities like trade fairs, exhibitions, meet and buyers and sellers meet. Now we will look at digitization, ease of doing business and facilitation. These general provisions under the EXIM policy increasingly prioritize online authorizations. We have already seen in the case of ERCMC, EBRC, self-certification where feasible, and risk-based inspections. This reduces manual handling and shortens cycle time while keeping audit trails for enforcement. Whenever the policy is revised, transitional provisions clarify how ongoing shipments, licenses, and obligations will be treated during the changeover. All the traders are expected to follow DGFT notifications and public notices to remain aligned with the latest requirements. What are the practical takeaway for exporters or businesses? Every exporter or any businesses dealing in export transactions must be well aware of the general provisions of the EXIM policy because they apply to every shipment regardless of the product or scheme. So the general provisions are on the whole applicable to every line of product, every line of exporter. Then following that, the specific sector-wise guidelines might be different. Maintain a clean IEC profile, use electronic systems, match documents across customs, bank and GST, and check the current policy status of your goods before you sign a contract. So dear students, we must remember that the EXIM policy's general guidelines are needed by every exporter and importer to be well read and understand what are the documents, the basic fundamental documents, the fundamental errors that are being made and how they can be rectified. Thank you, and we will shortly begin the lecture 5th of week 10.